You were never supposed to hear this. Not in school, not in any museum, not even whispered in the dusty halls of Egyptology. Because the truth about ancient Egypt's rituals does not belong to the realm of childlike fascination with pyramids and mummies. It belongs to a darker chamber, one sealed beneath centuries of silence. Imagine this: the flickering torchlight of a hidden tomb reveals not the noble triumphs of pharaohs, but carvings that show trembling bodies offered up to gods that never spoke, gods who were only masks for men. Men cloaked in sacred authority, who bent both the living and the dead to their will. Egypt was not only a civilization of gold and stone. It was a civilization of control of the body, the soul, and the deepest human impulses. Sexuality was not private, not personal, it was weaponized, ritualized, twisted into a machinery of power. In temples where the scent of frankincense hung heavy, children were examined like cattle, chosen for purity, stripped of choice, and branded as wives of the god. But do not be fooled by the poetry of the title. These girls were not brides, they were vessels. Their youth was currency, their bodies transformed into offerings, not to gods, but to the men who claimed to embody them. The truth lies here: the same hands that wrote hymns to the Nile also inscribed scenes of ritualized intercourse upon stone walls, scenes that archaeologists once debated hiding from the world because they shattered the illusion of Egypt as a place of serene wisdom. These weren't simply private acts, they were staged before the eyes of thousands. Imagine the marketplace erupting into festival, the drums pounding as a priest enacts the role of a god and a trembling woman is brought forth, dressed in thin linen that concealed nothing. The crowd roars as the act begins, not because of desire, but because they believed their survival depended on it. The Nile's flood, the harvest's abundance, the empire's strength, all of it chained to the suffering of those chosen to be divine vessels. This is the forbidden story, that Egypt's glory was drenched not only in blood, but in rituals of flesh and power. That behind every temple door, a darker ceremony unfolded. One that whispers to us still through cracked papyrus and broken walls. And tonight, I'm going to drag you down into it, step closer, because what I'm about to reveal is the kind of truth that cracks the mask of civilization itself. Ancient Egypt wrapped itself in the language of gods and eternity, but at its heart was a system of psychological control unlike any other. The high priests knew a secret: if you can chain a man's desire, you can chain his soul. And if you can dictate when, where, and how intimacy occurs, you no longer rule a kingdom, you rule the human body itself. The temple walls were not just decorated, they were encoded. Every symbol, every ritual, was engineered to condition the mind. To the common Egyptian, sex was not personal, it was cosmic law. Imagine being told since birth that the fertility of the Nile depended on what happened behind closed temple doors. Imagine believing that the most intimate act between two people was not theirs at all, but belonged to the state, to the priests, to the gods who never answered. That is not devotion, it is programming. Archaeologists uncovered papyrus fragments that detail selection rites. Girls as young as 12 examined in rows, stripped bare, judged by men who wore the mask of divinity. A crooked tooth, a small scar, an asymmetry of the body, each could be a sentence of rejection. But rejection meant freedom. Selection meant years of servitude disguised as sacred marriage. These girls did not simply lose their childhoods, they became living tools in a machine that converted innocence into power. The most horrific truth? These acts were often performed not in secret, but in public, before crowds who believed they were witnessing the gods themselves. Thousands gathered to see priests channel Min, Ammonius Ra, Osiris, male deities made flesh through human vessels. And before their eyes, trembling women were forced into unions where their fear was mistaken for divine ecstasy. Stone carvings still show it, faces averted, shame etched into every line, while musicians and dancers surrounded them, transforming suffering into spectacle. Do you understand the psychology at play? The people were not revolted, they were awed. They were made to believe that suffering was sacred, that violation was divine. This is how you break a society's spirit and keep it enslaved, not by chains of iron, but by chains of belief. And if this unsettles you, it should. Because the echoes of this system never truly died. They simply evolved, hiding in the institutions we still obey today. Look carefully, because here is the point where history stops feeling ancient. The methods carved into Egyptian stone are not relics, they are prototypes. What you just heard was not a strange ritual confined to the Valley of the Kings, it was the birth of something larger, the weaponization of intimacy itself. Once a society learns that sex can be used to command belief, it never forgets. It mutates. It hides behind new names, new faces, new institutions. But the game remains the same. In Egypt, the priests told the people that the Nile would flood only if the gods were satisfied. Fear and survival twisted together until the crowd cheered for acts that should have horrified them. That same formula lives on today. Dress control as necessity, dress exploitation as holiness, dress submission as duty, and the masses will not only accept it, they will defend it. Ask yourself, how many times in your life have you been told what desire means? Who defines purity? Who defines morality? Who defines sin? In Egypt, these definitions were the property of priests. Today, they are still property, only the temples have changed. Media, governments, corporations, entire religions, each learned to manipulate the most primal human instincts to maintain obedience. The Egyptians were masters of spectacle. They understood that public rituals break the individual. When a trembling girl was forced into a union before thousands of eyes, her pain became theater. The crowd did not see her humanity, they saw a symbol, a necessary sacrifice for the collective. That is the deepest manipulation of all, turning suffering into performance, until no one dares question it. This is why the walls of those temples were carved in such detail. It wasn't just to record, it was to program. To remind every witness that intimacy belonged to the gods, and therefore, to the men who controlled the gods' voices. To make rebellion feel like blasphemy. To make silence feel like loyalty. To make obedience feel holy. And now I must warn you. The further we descend, the more this history begins to mirror your own life. If you think these rituals are buried under sand, you are mistaken. Their logic survives, hidden in systems that still watch you, still feed on your belief, still train you to mistake chains for blessings. There is a reason the ancients called Egypt, the Black Land. Not only for the fertile soil left by the Nile, but for the shadows that covered the truth. The priests were not only orchestrators of ritual, they were engineers of obedience. They knew something terrifying: if you control the meaning of pleasure and the definition of purity, you own both the body and the mind. Think about what that means. The girl stripped and examined in the temple was not just chosen for service, she was chosen to prove that the people's survival was tied to her submission. Every trembling breath she took in front of the crowd was a message: you are small, the gods are vast. Your body is not yours, it belongs to something greater. That message didn't stop at the temple door. It sank into the psyche of every man, woman, and child who witnessed it. It reshaped desire itself, bending it to serve power. The ritual was never about intimacy. It was about theater. The moment a high priest wore the mask of Ammonius Ra, he was no longer just a man, he was a living god. And when he claimed a woman before thousands, he wasn't taking her body, he was taking the will of the crowd. This is the essence of psychological control: make the people cheer for their own chains. Do you see it yet? Egypt was not a world of mystery, it was a world of programming. Every drumbeat, every hymn, every carved figure of Min with his eternal erection, they were not primitive symbols, but instructions. They whispered into the subconscious: obey. Submit. Offer yourself. The gods demand it. And the people believed, because belief was survival. This is why you are listening now. Because deep down, part of you recognizes that these patterns did not end in the temples of Luxor. They were copied, rebranded, passed down through centuries until they became the silent rules of the world you live in today. And if you feel the weight of this truth pressing on you right now, good. That means you're waking up. To prove it, type these words into the comments below: I break the chains of hidden masters. Do it once, and you signal awareness. Do it twice, and you etch it into your identity. Because this is not entertainment, it's transformation. When you trace the shadows of history, you find that Egypt's rituals did not die with the desert sands. They migrated. They were carried by conquerors, absorbed into new empires, hidden beneath new symbols. Rome studied Egypt not only for its architecture and mathematics, but for its mastery of control. The spectacle of the Colosseum was nothing more than an echo of Egypt's temple festivals, human suffering turned into theater, belief bound to blood. And religion became the most efficient smuggler of these ancient codes. In the ancient temples, women were stripped and labeled wives of the god. In later faiths, the language changed, but the control remained. Virginity was sanctified, celibacy glorified, desire demonized, and always, someone else defined the rules. Do you see the pattern? Egypt's priests discovered the formula: turn the natural into the forbidden, then sell the cure through obedience. And that formula still governs billions of minds today. Even the architecture tells the truth. The towering obelisks that dot capitals across the world, from Rome to Paris, from London to Washington, are not random monuments. They are the phallic symbols of Min, the god of sexual power, ripped from Egypt's soil and planted at the heart of modern empires. Hidden in plain sight, these silent pillars mock the crowd that walks beneath them, unaware they are staring at an ancient emblem of control. But the deepest inheritance was not stone, it was psychological. Egypt taught rulers that the surest way to enslave a people is not through force, but through ritualized humiliation disguised as holiness. When the crowd witnesses degradation and is told it is divine, they learn submission at a level deeper than thought. It becomes instinct. It becomes identity. And here is the truth that should unsettle you: these systems were never designed to end. They were designed to evolve. What began in the sanctuaries of Luxor became the rulebooks of Rome, the laws of the medieval church, the codes of modern institutions. Each time, the costumes changed. Each time, the rituals were renamed. But the skeleton remained the same. Egypt was not simply a civilization of pyramids, it was a civilization of prototypes. And you, whether you know it or not, still live inside its shadow. Listen carefully, because this is where the history you've been hearing stops being distant and begins to live inside your own skin. The same machinery that turned trembling girls into offerings before the crowd is still running today, only now it wears the mask of progress, entertainment, and freedom. Egypt discovered the formula: take what is most primal, twist it into ritual, and use it to govern men without them realizing they are governed. You are told what to desire. You are told what to fear. You are told what love is, what loyalty means, what your body is worth. Every advertisement, every screen, every institution repeats the same message Egypt carved into stone: your instincts are not yours, they belong to something higher. And just like the peasants who cheered in the temple square, you are made to believe that obedience is survival. The truth is darker. What you consume, what you worship, what you obey, it is engineered. And just as the priests once wore the mask of Ammonius Ra, today's architects of control wear suits, sit in boardrooms, stand on podiums. The gods changed names, but the rituals never ended. You are still being fed the same lies: that humiliation can be holy, that submission is sacred, that silence keeps you safe. Do you feel it now? That heavy sense in your chest that maybe the chains you thought you broke were never really shattered, only polished? That your life has been shaped by rules you never agreed to, drawn up by hands you will never see? That is the awakening. Painful. Uncomfortable. Necessary. Because here is the secret they never wanted you to know: the moment you see the ritual, it loses its power. The moment you call the mask what it is, a mask, you are no longer the crowd cheering in the square. You are the man who steps out of line. You are the fracture in their illusion. And that transformation begins now. To anchor it, I want you to write in the comments, "The mask shatters when I see the truth." Write it once to defy. Write it twice to declare. Do it, and you claim what was always yours, the right to think, to see, to choose. Because Egypt's shadow only rules those who remain blind. And you are not blind anymore. The torches are almost out. The air grows heavy, as if the tomb itself is listening. We began with whispers on temple walls, but now you see the full shape of the shadow. What was carved into stone in Egypt was not only the record of a civilization, it was a manual for control. A manual so powerful that kings, empires, churches, and governments copied it for thousands of years. A manual that still governs the world you live in. The Egyptians understood something most people will never grasp: if you corrupt the most sacred human impulse, you do not just dominate flesh, you dominate destiny. Sexuality, intimacy, love, in Egypt, these were not private choices. They were the raw material of empire. Priests discovered that if you dictate who may touch, who may marry, who may bear children, you dictate the future itself. Control reproduction, and you control generations. Control desire, and you enslave the soul. Every empire that followed drank from this poisoned well. Rome turned gladiatorial blood into theater. Medieval faiths cloaked celibacy in robes and chains. Modern powers reinvented the temple ritual as entertainment, selling submission on glowing screens while calling it freedom. Do you see it yet? The ritual is everywhere, only hidden in plain sight. And this is why Egypt still haunts us. Because the rituals were never about gods, they were about power. The gods were excuses, masks, shadows cast on the wall while men tightened their grip on humanity. And the crowd, just like today, cheered for its own imprisonment. But here is the secret those priests could never kill: once a man sees the ritual, he is no longer bound by it. Once you understand that the humiliation they called holy was only theater, you begin to stand outside the crowd. You begin to see the puppeteers, not the gods. And when you see the puppeteers, they lose their power. That is why this knowledge is dangerous. Because once you carry it, you cannot go back. You will walk through the world differently. You will see the obelisks rising in your city not as monuments but as relics of ancient control. You will hear the voices of institutions not as holy commands, but as echoes of priests who wore the mask of divinity to cover their hunger. You will never again mistake ritual for truth. So now, ask yourself, will you be the one who cheers with the crowd, blind and obedient, or the one who steps out of line, eyes wide open? That choice is the difference between chains and freedom. And history has always belonged to the men who dared to step out of line. The torches go out. The tomb grows silent. But you are not the same man who entered. You have seen what was hidden. And once seen, there is no unseeing.